Benjamin Davis.
Thank you so much.
Actually, I thought when we introduced Johnny, I thought people would boo, but you know, he died, so it doesn't matter. You got
Happy
me.
with that too.
All right, so like I said before, we sat, Greg had a film at our festival as a producer a few years, it was 2012, 2013?
Yeah, 2012.
And you mentioned you'd introduced me to Clint, said, hey, you got this friend who moved to Dallas who wants to get to know things, and you guys talked about this film. I think, yeah, we met at that coffee shop in Oak Lawn area, we talked about this short film you're making. So talk about from that short to where we got to right now.
Well, we can even go further back than that.
Oh, wow.
So in college, actually, I started an organization that worked down in the borderlands, mainly in Nuevo Laredo. So if you take I-35 straight south and you hit Mexico, you go across that bridge and you're in an entirely different world. And the whole idea was, I was a college student myself, and we would take college students and we'd go work in these communities called colonias and an orphanage that mainly were byproducts of the border conflict. So displaced families, all sorts of weird and crazy stuff. And you know, it wasn't completely altruistic. We would eat a lot of tacos and drink some beer and talk about life and what it all means. But every time we'd take a trip, we'd go back across that bridge and a Border Patrol agent would lean in our window and ask if we were citizens. And that was the extent to my knowledge of Border Patrol. And when it came time to make my first film, I knew I was going to come back to the border. I knew it was a part of my heart that was very important to me. Didn't know a way in. And the more we started learning about Border Patrol and our 4 years of research into the agency, the more fascinating it became, and we saw beyond the symbol of the uniform, we saw the human beings, and that's when we really started building something.
Yeah, you guys set out to do a story, because there's an opportunity here to be more political. You said that's not where you went.
No.
Yeah. So that was never in the plan. The plan was like, I'm going to tell this great sort of thriller at the border.
Yeah, you know, and I'll let Clint jump in on this too, but the approach was like, the idea was like, if we could go in through people's jobs, their 9 to 5, and we all have different views about the job that we do, some positive, some not so positive, but through that, somewhere in the middle of the viewpoints of these 3 guys, somewhere in there is maybe the truth of what it's really like there. And if we could just stay through the point of view of the 3 men and not sort of choose sides, but maybe the power is shifting always, then maybe we could get closer to what it really is like there. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think going back to one thing you said earlier, the thing that got us into the whole subject was people who had come across the border, who were stuck in the border. And so when we started hanging around Border Patrol agents, they were humanized to us through those situations, those interactions. And so the only thing we wanted to do was show that it's a crazy, complicated situation, and on one side of the line there are people, and on the other side of the line there are people. And that's it.
Let's talk to Johnny for a second.
Hi,
got a
Johnny.
mic.
How you doing? Hello.
So literally I was telling Daniel Labs, who's going to be doing a Q&A tomorrow night with this, I was like, remember that time when we just said, I hope Ben dies at one point, and then we felt bad because the character's complicated, and there's times that I'm so rooting for your demise, and other times like he's just doing for his family. So when the script came to you, talk about your interpretations of Ben Davis. I mean, we were thinking, is he bad, is he good? I don't think it's that simple.
Right, that's like ultimately the goal with any character. I also did a movie called Perks of Being a Wallflower where I played a character named Brad, and we started doing press for that, and I didn't realize that he was a villain until press. And I think that's something that I felt with Davis as well. I didn't think he was an antagonist in any way until we started talking about it, because I can't, if he's an antagonist or a villain, then I'm a villain, because if I was in that situation, I can't imagine what I would do. I have a brother who's in the military, and faced with protecting your family and protecting the code that is behind these guys, when faced with hopefully, not typical circumstance, it's a very tough decision to make. And the whole time through, we were thinking about that. We were debating how far is he in the cartel, what can be behind his eyes that makes you root for his eventual demise or his, saving his family.
Yeah. No, I was, you know, and the demise is actually a pretty great action scene. We'll talk about choreography later. Was there ever a point when you guys were writing this that he lived? Was there ever a point?
No, Davis.
Well, you know, it's interesting actually. In the way we write movies is we start with a world that's fascinating to us, that we want to peel the curtain back and understand it better, and then we think about who are the people that inhabit that place, and are they in harmony or conflict with the place that they're in, and then we're like, okay, well, what's a story on top of that? Some crazy crap that can happen to take those characters through that world. But in, you know, the years that it took to write the script, we had many different iterations. We always had the same world, we always had the same agents, but Davis was actually a hero in one of the drafts, and
Wow.
then became, and I think Hobbs at one time was a villain. It just kind of, it always shifted because we were like, well, depending on, you know, who the cartel chose and who they marked, any one of these guys could have been the bad guy. Maybe not Flores, but maybe Flores. You know? The thing about the cartel is that they find out what is your heart. What do you most care about? How can we, you know, turn that? How can we use that against you?
And the thing that Johnny found about that character that was really interesting, that I don't even think that we saw until we started talking to Johnny about it, was when the scene where he pulls the gun on his partners. It's Johnny found that the way in was I'm sorry. You're pulling a gun and you're telling them to get in the back of the truck and you're tying them up, but it's all through the veil of I'm really sorry that I had to do this.
Really?
I mean, definitely. We had some great people work with us on this film, and one of the guys' name was Sam Sadler, who had been a Border Patrol agent for how many years?
25 years.
25 years, and to pull a gun on your brother, because it's a brotherhood, you go through hell together, and any form of military or law enforcement or people who risk their lives for our safety, it becomes this brotherhood that only you can explain to each other. And then he described it as once you go home, you gotta let that bit go. But I don't remember what the question was.
Yeah, well, and also like
Just wanted to go on a tangent.
Yeah, we had a casting director who looked at the project and said that, you know, these are the three agents you want to see retire together, you know, and that's kind of the tragedy of the film, is that gets ripped apart, and I think it's sad. There's a sadness that moves through each one of you that the circumstances play out the way they do.
Yeah, pulling the gun was tough for sure, which immediately turns to anger and aggression and loss of control.
We shot that scene in an hour, actually. It's 8 pages, and that's typically what you shoot in a day's worth of work in terms of movie standards or TV standards. And I don't think we were planning to shoot in an hour. It just kind of ended up that we had an hour to get the scene. But it kind of let this urgency to it. I mean, each of the actors only had one close-up take before the sun went away, which we faced every day. But it led it to like be that kind of palpable thing that was all raw. It was like all just spilled out of, you know, Johnny's soul onto the screen.
And it seemed to be, it seems to be paralleled. I don't know how production was, but the relationship on screen, as you guys were just getting to know each other, sort of like you're the new guy and everything. How was that off screen? I mean, you see, Clifton Collins Jr. is great, and Gabriel's. I haven't seen a lot of him. I don't. But Clifton, I'm a huge fan, and I've watched all of you. Hell, I proposed to my wife right after Perks of Being a Wallflower. So. Dude, there you go. So.
Your wife in the crowd? Let's celebrate.
She'll be here. She'll be seeing it tomorrow night. So.
I grew up watching Capote like all the time.
Yeah.
And I've been a huge fan. I grew up in Dallas, and we actually knew each other back in 2003 when Sideways was coming out, and I was volunteering at Deep Ellum Film Festival, and that was also right around the time that Capote was coming out.
Yeah.
And seeing Clifton Collins Jr., I'm like, how am I ever going to not see him as anything other than all these great characters he played? But then he has an ability to disarm you, like throws that away immediately. We had this great talk at this random hotel. I don't even remember what it's called. What is it?
It's the Quality Inn.
Quality Inn. Quality Inn in Deming, New Mexico. It doesn't get any better than that. There's just lush grass out in the back where we sat, you know, picnic style, and talked about the script, and it was just like a really neat moment where I just felt the bond, you know.
Yeah.
But we were getting to know each other too, you know.
It was sometimes hard though because each actor had a very different process, and it was kind of trying to create a space to bring out their best work. And you know, Johnny's a hugely experiential actor, and the exciting thing is you really never know what you're gonna get every take, and I mean that in the best way, like.
Or in between takes.
Or in between takes.
I showed
But
up with a 64 Airstream.
that's what I was about to get to. Yeah, he bought it on the way from LA. He was like, "Oh, I need an Airstream to live on set," and it was
in
this
the middle of nowhere with no gas or
air conditioning.
a bathroom or anything. And this isn't an Airstream like you think of on one of those hot rod fix-up things. It's like, I think the tires popped 2 times on the way, and I was even wondering if I was going to make it there. But
And then ended
somehow
up
worked.
with a puppy, Romulus. They got it at Walmart in Deming. That became our dog, the set dog. But you know,
I'm much more professional than that now. For anybody out there making a film in the future.
With Clifton, you go into his hotel room, and it's like going into the studio and at the end of Beautiful Mind when you realize that, you know, John Nash is crazy. And because there's Post-it notes all over the walls and like papers on the floor, and he's just so in deep. And it's all about the material for him. You really have to defend everything in the script, and if you can't, just being open to discovering what it should become. And you know, he discovered whole monologues that were so great that we just rolled them, and they're up on the screen. And then Gabriel's like just a very present actor, and really kind of all about bringing like sort of the family of the crew together, which I think really reflected his character. You know, brought a snow cone stand out into the middle of the desert for the crew. So yeah, it was really exciting to play with all that as a director.
Cool. Time for some questions?